It's now NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian and Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. Guys, good morning to you both. Ken, you listened to that reporting, some of what NBC News has learned in the last day or so, and it just boggles the mind all over again that this young man was able to get on the roof of a building that was about 130 yards away from the former president of the United States while he spoke, especially when you hear there were officers stationed inside the building. And when you see all those eyewitnesses in that chilling video saying there's a guy on a roof with a gun. That's 90 seconds or so before he opened fire. So the signs were there. But I understand the head of the Secret Service spoke just a few moments ago. What did we learn?
That's right, Willie. So this question of the roof and how it was not secured has loomed over this situation for the past 48 hours. And now Kimberly Cheadle, the director of the Secret Service, has shed new light on what she says happened. First of all, she tells ABC News that a decision was made to have local law enforcement secure that site. And as you said, she said that local law enforcement officers were in the building while he was on the roof. But then she also said this. She said that building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, you know, there's a safety factor that would be considered there that we would want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, you know, the decision was made to secure the building from inside. So that tells us two things. Even though this building was outside the security perimeter, the Secret Service, of course, had it as part of the overall planning to secure the site. They assigned it to local law enforcement, and they knew that local law enforcement had made a decision, for whatever reason, not to go on the roof, but they were inside. And so it just raises a host of new questions about, you know, was anybody from the Secret Service making sure that the local officers were doing their jobs to secure that building? Obviously, something fell down in a major way there. She didn't say exactly which local agency was assigned, but NBC News has spoken to the Butler County Sheriff, whose deputies were there and who were among those who apparently climbed up the ladder to try to confront the shooter. And he has simply said, I'm not going to get involved in the blame game. My guys were assigned to do a job. They did their job, and that's all I'm saying. So a lot of questions remain to be answered here, Willie.
So, Ken, obviously, a lot of people look at that layout when you look at the map and they say, how was that building outside the security perimeter guarded by the Secret Service? We understand they have to set a perimeter somewhere. They do it at all the events. But when you're on a sparsely populated rural area where there just aren't that many buildings, it would make sense to most people, to the layman even, to say, well, that building that has a direct line into the stage where the president is going to be standing for about an hour or so, just over a football field away. By this map, it's 148 yards. How is that not secured by the Secret Service? I think that's just a question that still doesn't have a satisfactory answer to a lot of people looking at this.
Yeah, that's right. And look, the former Secret Service agents and former and current law enforcement officials that I've spoken to and our colleagues have spoken to over the last 48 hours, they've all made that point. There's no explanation for it. It was just a wrong call. That should have been within the perimeter. Since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, one of the top priorities of the Secret Service has been to command the high ground, particularly during an outdoor event, and to make sure that any place that somebody could situate with a rifle was covered. And in this case, it just wasn't. And that's a fundamental failure that goes to the heart of the first job of the Secret Service.
We talked about it in earlier hours about what happened after the shooting. Obviously, they should have secured the perimeter. It's just unspeakable, an unspeakable lapse, and almost an extraordinarily tragic lapse for all of America, but has been for a family now in Pennsylvania, a fireman, a father, husband who lost his life because that failure, and two others seriously injured. There's a second part of this, though. I'm curious what Secret Service, former Secret Service officials you've talked to have thought about what happened up on stage. Here's the shot from Wall Street Journal published this shot. Donald Trump, and we've counted this several times, he's up, he's exposed 7, 8, 9 seconds, and on stage was still exposed walking down the stage. They covered him up better. Go look at that, though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's for 10 seconds, he's exposed. Then they do their best to cover him up while they're walking to the car. When he gets to the car, they do something that, you know, in reading history books, for years past, I heard how, you know, a president, before getting into a car, would stand up and wave to the crowd, and the Secret Service people would freak out because he exposed himself for a split second. Here, they had no idea there wasn't a second shooter, third shooter, fourth shooter. And this doesn't look like, this looks like it's such a horrible failure of training. If you look at past Secret Service incidences, as Willie has said before, where you hear even a balloon pop or the threat, they throw themselves on top of the subject, whoever it is, and they cover him or her up all the way to a vehicle or an ambulance. Here, there you see him again, exposing again. And as we've said in earlier hours, you don't blame the politician for that. That's what politicians do. And certainly that's what Donald Trump would do. This is, again, on the Secret Service. What are the thoughts about how exposed he was on stage, even after the shots?
Joe, I think you're right to hone in on that. And from what I've heard from former Secret Service agents and experts in personal security, that was just not how it's supposed to work. And you're right. We've all seen videos of balloons popping and Secret Service or other bodyguards rushing the protectee off the stage, physically manhandling them to get them off the stage and out of harm's way. And in that instance, as you noted earlier in the show, his head was higher than their heads. And they lingered, and they appeared to be deferring to him. Now, are these members of the Secret Service detail who have been with Donald Trump a long time and have a habit of deferring to him? That's a really good question, I think, that needs to be asked. What happened here? Now, we also need to take into account, because the tactical guys, remember, came out after the shots were fired, and at some point somebody said, clear, shooter down. So were they relaxed at that moment? But that's, as you said, one shooter down. They had no idea whether there were other shooters, right? And that's not, their training is not to be satisfied that one shooter is down. It's to rush the protectee into a safe situation, which clearly did not happen there.
Right. And you know, Peter Baker, again, I've heard people over the weekend go, well, Donald Trump will want to get up. And like I said, every politician's going to want to get up. But that's not the politician's call. We saw that on January the 6th when President Trump wanted to go up to the Capitol. They said, sorry, sir, we're taking you back to the White House. And I think most dramatically that happened on 9/11, when George Bush kept yelling and insisting and demanding that he be flown back to Washington, D.C., that he was not going to go to any other military outposts, take him back to Washington, D.C., and at that point, the Secret Service said to him, we're sorry, Mr. President, this is not your plane. It's ours. And our job is to protect you. And you're not going back to Washington, D.C. until it's secured. So with that as a backdrop, I raised the question, what in the world were they doing exposing Donald Trump for 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds on stage when they should have done what we've seen time and again? Put him down, cover him up, take him to the car, guide him in the car safely, and never, ever let a second or a third shooter have an exposed shot to him.
Yeah, Joe, you're exactly right. It's a very good question. It's hard to imagine what was going through their minds. It's worth remembering these are brave people who threw themselves at the president, the former president, in order to put themselves in harm's way to protect him. But you're right that the ethos of the Secret Service, as I remember from the very beginning, when I was in the 90s, I started covering the White House in the 90s. I remember they walked me through their ethos in a very detailed, granular way. And it was always cover and evacuate, cover and evacuate. That's the thing, you know. Cover and get the protectee out of harm's way. And you're right. You remember the Reagan assassination attempt. What did Jerry Parr do, the famous Secret Service agent there? He shoved Reagan into the waiting limo, which was right there, fortunately, for them, and he got him out of harm's way, literally in a second or two, and they got him out of there. And in fact, he wanted to go back to the White House, and it's Jerry Parr who sees Reagan Reagan's mouth begin to foam and searches through his, his armpit to find the bullet hole and directs them to go to the hospital, which is what saved Reagan's life. So you're right. The Secret Service is responsible for not just covering the president, but not listening to him if he wants to pump his fist at the crowd, because their first priority is to get him out of there, keep him out of harm's way. And obviously it took a while for them to do that. He's a big guy. He must be hard to move, I imagine, if he's not willing to. But they had enough people around him, obviously, that they're supposed to literally lift him up. When on 9/11, you remember 9/11, you just said about 9/11 and George W. Bush. In the White House, Dick Cheney was in his office when this happens, and suddenly Secret Service rushes into his office, and one of his agents is behind him in a second and lifting him up by his, the pants. Literally physically off his feet to get him out of that office down to the bunker, because they think another plane is heading toward the White House. And that's the doctrine that Secret Service is supposed to follow.
And Peter, let's be clear. These people came into the Secret Service because they wanted to protect presidents. They wanted to protect candidates, and we salute them all for their service. My question from the beginning has been about training. Who trained these people? How did the Secret Service stray so far from that ethos that you talked about? And I suspect there are going to be radical changes inside the Secret Service, including a change of leadership soon. Would you not guess?
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens, right, obviously. But you're right that there'll be questions and there'll be a lot of second-guessing. Second-guessing is easy. Let's of course, remember that training is not the same thing as an actual situation where gunfire is happening. But you're right. I mean, people, this is supposed to be instinct. It's supposed to be instantaneous. It's supposed to be without thought. You saw them doing what the training obviously taught them. One of the agents is trying to put his hand up to make sure, to get in between any possible additional shots. But Trump is a big guy, and they allowed him to be visible to the crowd for a remarkable long time, if you look at it in hindsight. Again, hindsight's perfect, but it will, I think, raise a lot of questions. And I think you're right. People will look at the training and say, what can we do to avoid this kind of situation again?
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.